The UK is a sovereign country formed by the union of 4 separate countries: England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. The flag for the United Kingdom is a combination of the flags that represent the patron saints of England, Scotland, and Ireland. Wales was only partially part of England when the flag was created in 1606, and so unfortunately doesn't have its own contribution to the design. Surrounded by Atlantic Ocean, the UK's main island is called Great Britain. To the west, across the Irish Sea, Northern Ireland shares the landmass known as the Island of Ireland, with the Republic of Ireland, a country that is separate from the United Kingdom. South of the UK is the English Channel, which separates the north of France from the south of England. In total, the whole area of the UK is 242,500 square kilometers, which is only about half the size of Spain and about the same size as the US state of Michigan. The UK has a democratically elected government, but still has a monarchy that continues to this day. The current monarch, 95-year-old Queen Elizabeth II, is the longest ever reigning British monarch, being queen for roughly 70 years. The first humanoid stepped on English soil between 950,000 and 700,000 years ago, and called the land home during the warmer eras between ice ages. This was before Britain was even its own island. It used to be connected to the rest of Europe. Neanderthals then occupied the lands 300,000 to 400,000 years ago. They returned to Britain many times between then and 50,000 years ago, and maybe even later. The first settled modern humans followed about 12,000 years ago. The UK finally became an island only 8,000 years ago as sea levels rose. The island of Britain was home to about 30 indigenous tribes, the largest of which were the Belgae, Brigantes, the Siluris, and the Iceni. The Bronze Age began around 2300 BCE, followed by the Ice Age some 1500 years later. The Romans invaded in 43 CE and took control of Britain until the fall of the Roman Empire in 410 CE. After the Romans came the Dark Ages. During this time, Britain was fragmented and was not considered a single country. For the next 500 or so years, many different groups contended to claim regions of English land. Irish raiders from the west, Angles, Saxons, and Jutes from the east. Even Vikings tried their hand at claiming a chunk of Britain. The region which is now Wales was a mix of separate kingdoms, the largest of which were Gwynedd and Powys. The early Middle Ages brought the origins of the name England around 500 BCE. The Angles called their land Enga land, meaning land of the English. This naming became consistent in many languages at the time. The Latin name for the land was Anglia, or Anglorum Terra, while the Old French name was Angleterre. In the 8th century, the region known as Mercia was suffering frequent raids from Powys. To defend themselves, they dug up a massive ditch which stretched for 64 miles. It became known as Offa's Dyke, and eventually marked the border between England and Wales. In the 9th century, England was divided into 7 kingdoms known as the Heptarchy: East Anglia, Mercia, Northumbria, Kent, Essex, Sussex, and Wessex. By 878 CE, Vikings had taken East Anglia, Northumbria, and Mercia from the Anglo-Saxons. In the 10th century, after many conflicts, England was finally reunified as a single country by Aethelstan, king of the Anglo-Saxons. In the 11th century, England briefly became part of the Scandinavian Empire, when Danish Prince Canute the Great won the throne in 1016. Canute was the first monarch to name himself the Rex Angile, or the King of England, as opposed to Rex Anglorum, or the King of the English. 15 years later, Malcolm II of Scotland followed suit and submitted his lands to Canute the Great in 1031. Canute's sons held England for about 25 years until a Saxon king, Edward the Confessor, took the throne in 1042. Edward held on until the famous Battle of Hastings in 1066. The battle was won by William the Conqueror, a Norman from what is now modern-day France, and marks the start of an era known as medieval England. From this time until the Stuart era in 1603, there was much conflict between England and Scotland on the Anglo-Scottish frontier. Much of the contested land was known as the Debatable Lands. For centuries, towns like Berwick-upon-Tweed were in question as to whether they belonged to the Kingdom of Scotland or the Kingdom of England. 1357 saw the Treaty of Berwick, and some general peace for the frontier. The Tudors would take over in 1485 with a win by King Henry VII after the War of the Roses. 1496 would be the first time England attempted to conquer the West. Henry VII commissioned Italian explorer John Cabot to lead an expedition to discover a route to Asia across the Atlantic, after the overseas success of Spain and Portugal. What Cabot found instead was Canadian Newfoundland, previously discovered by the Nordic Leif Erikson in 1000 CE. Believing he had reached Asia, Cabot returned without establishing a colony. A year later, he set out again with a fleet of 5 ships, but he and his crewmates were never seen again. It is not known if they were lost at sea or decided to settle with the indigenous people of North America. Henry VII VII's son, the infamous King Henry VIII, began his reign in 1509. Henry VIII is known as the man who married 6 different wives in an attempt to gain a male heir for the throne. Henry VIII also contributed to the conflict happening on the Anglo-Scottish border, declaring war on Scotland in 1543. This turned into an 8-year conflict known as the Rough Wooing, and included the 1544 burning of Edinburgh. During this turmoil on the northern border, the border between Wales and England had remained almost identical since the 8th century. In the 16th century, some 800 years after it was first dug, Offa's Dyke was finally established as part of the modern boundary we still see today. This era also laid the foundations of what would become the British Empire. With the aim of establishing the transatlantic slave trade, Queen Elizabeth I called for raids on Spanish and Portuguese ships carrying enslaved people from West Africa, in efforts to gain power along trade routes and expand British reach in Africa, Spain, and the Americas. The 16th century also saw the first overseas British colony established. The English began to seize land for plantations in an effort to civilize Ireland. This practice continued for the next 2 centuries. At the beginning of the 17th century, the Stuarts took over, a Scottish line whose ascension to the English throne brought peace along the Anglo-Scottish border. James VI of Scotland became James I of England, and unified the 2 realms under the Kingdom of England. 1607 saw Britain's first permanent American colony in Jamestown, Virginia. Over the following centuries, they expanded into further parts of North America, as well as South America and the Caribbean, displacing the large majority of the estimated 3.8 to 18 million indigenous Americans, a number that would be whittled down to just a few 100,000 by the 20th century. By the end of British colonization in America, settlers brought an estimated population of 3.5 million enslaved people into the land, roughly a third of the 10 million enslaved people that were shipped across the Atlantic. By 1650 alone, it is estimated that there are 74.6 million European settlers on North American land. The 18th century marked the arrival of the Kingdom of Great Britain in 1707, and the First British Empire. The Treaty of the Union officially made Scotland part of Great Britain after what was previously a personal union since 1603's Treaty of the Crown. The Georgian era began in 1714, and the Industrial Revolution followed in 1770. A boom in new technology such as steam power turned Britain into the workshop of the world. By the late 18th century, Britain had expanded its reach into 13 colonies in North America. However, the American War of Independence officially began on April 19, 1775, with the Declaration of Independence being ratified just over a year later on July 4, 1776. The war continued until September 3, 1783, with much of the later conflict being over Canadian colonies. By the end of the War of 1812, Britain kept some influence over Canada, which became separate from the United States. The Irish Rebellion of 1798 led to the Acts of Union in 1800, where the Parliament of Ireland merged with the Parliament of Great Britain. The United Kingdom of Great Britain became the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland in 1801. The 19th century saw the continued expansion of the British Empire. This period is largely covered by the Victorian era. Queen Victoria took the throne as an 18-year-old in 1837 and held it for 64 years until her death in 1901. She oversaw the expansion of railway, steamship, and telegraph networks, and by the end of her reign, the British Empire covered 1/5 of the Earth's land surface. In the 20th century, Britain saw many conflicts, including the Irish War of Independence, the First and Second World Wars, various colonial conflicts, and the Falklands War. The 2.5-year Irish War of Independence began on the 21st of January 1919. In 1920, the Government of Ireland Act partitioned Ireland into a separate Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. This gave Northern Ireland its own government and a place within the United Kingdom. However, Southern Ireland ignored the act and instead recognized the newly created Irish Republic. After much conflict, the Anglo-Irish Treaty was signed on the 6th of December 1921 and stated that the Irish Free State within a year will become a self-governing dominion within the community of nations known as the British Empire, a status the same as that of the Dominion of Canada. The United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland was ended and changed to today's name of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, or just United Kingdom for short. The 20th century also saw many native people from lands previously owned by the Empire fighting against their colonizers for their own independence. This included conflicts in British Malaya from 1948 to 1955, and in Kenya from 1952 to 1960, just to name a couple. The British Empire lost all of its South and Southeast Asian colonies after Japanese occupation in the Second World War. India gained independence in 1947. Many people consider 1997 to be the end of the British Empire, when the United Kingdom handed authority over Hong Kong to the People's Republic of China, which leads us to where we are today. While the British Empire is now long gone, there are still about 14 overseas territories that remain under British sovereignty, including Bermuda, Gibraltar, and the Falkland Islands. Additionally, a large number of former territories of the British Empire joined the Commonwealth of Nations that constitute 54 member states. 16 of these states still retain Queen Elizabeth II as their monarch, including Canada and Australia. Nonetheless, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law are stated as shared values found in this Commonwealth Charter. Did you also know that we're running a Kickstarter for our game Borders Europe that depicts the UK's land borders with Ireland? It would help us loads if you check out the link in the description or comments to follow or make a pledge. Thank you for watching, and see you again on our next flight.